helpful that they pointed me in this direction. I was presented during my deposition with two articles, or at least two pieces of information. One was an op-ed that the Ukrainian ambassador Charlie wrote in 2016 in The Hill. So this is during the presidential campaign when President Trump was then the nominee for the Republican Party. And this is Ambassador Charlie, who was then, still the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, being critical of President Trump, who was then the nominee for the Republican Party, for making comments about Ukraine, Crimea, and Russia.
May I interrupt you there? Let me be very specific about what those comments were. The president, when he was a candidate, said, quote, "The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were." So Ambassador Charlie is responding to that in that article, correct?
That's correct, and he just uses this as a peg because, to be honest, the whole article is actually about Ukraine. And this is classic standard for anyone who wants to write an op-ed. I've written plenty of them myself. You pick a peg by something that you or somebody else might have said, and then you proceed to say what you want to say.
Right, so here it is.
What Ambassador Charlie does is he talks about Ukraine's position vis-a-vis Russia and Russian aggression against Ukraine.
Yeah, and let me just read, because it's worth people hearing what this severe attack on candidate Trump, who has suggested that the Crimeans would rather be with Russia. Ambassador Charlie writes, "Even if Trump's comments are only speculative and do not really reflect a future foreign policy, they call for appeasement of an aggressor and support the violation of a sovereign country's territorial integrity and another's breach of international law." Dun, dun, dun. That's the attack on candidate Trump. Does that sound like election interference to you?
Well, I would say that it's probably not the most advisable thing to do for an ambassador because you never know who's going to win. And I think that the second piece that was presented to me at great length, and I want to thank Mr. Castor for making me go back and read it again, because when you asked me the questions about it, I did remember the piece. Kenneth Vogel is a very well-known and, as you pointed out, extremely good journalist. And I'd remembered reading this back in the day in January of 2017, but it had been a long time between then and October. And you gave me a copy, and I went back and read it again, because I think it actually is extraordinarily important. It gets to this issue here. Mr. Vogel points out that the Ukrainian government, again, they wouldn't have done very well at the bookies, picking up the issue I pointed out at the beginning of today, they bet on the wrong horse. They bet on Hillary Clinton winning the election. And so, they were trying to curry favor with the Clinton campaign. It's quite evident here. And he relates, to some extent, individuals and some Ukrainian officials, like Mr. Avakov, the Interior Minister, and a number of other people that he names here and that have been named at various points, and talks about how they were trying to collect information, as Ranking Member Nunes said, on Mr. Manafort and on other people as well. However, I do want to point out that the crux of the article here by Mr. Vogel is he said there was little evidence of a top-down effort by Ukraine. And he makes a distinction between the Russian effort that was personally directed by Russian President Putin and involved the country's military and foreign intelligence services. Now, I don't think that those two things are exactly the same. I also mentioned in my deposition of October 14th that, in fact, many officials from many countries, including Ukraine, bet on the wrong horse. They believed that Secretary Clinton, former Senator Clinton, former First Lady Clinton was going to win. And many said some pretty disparaging and hurtful things about President Trump, and I can't blame him for feeling aggrieved about them. And when we were setting up head of state visits, and I remember I have a portfolio of 50-plus countries, plus NATO and the European Union, we thought it prudent to collect as much as possible about comments that people might have said about the president during the campaign when he was either one of the candidates to be the nominee for the Republican Party, or when he was actually the candidate running against Hillary Clinton. And I'm sorry to say that an awful lot, and perhaps I shouldn't name them here because it will have consequences, an awful lot of senior officials in many governments, including our allied governments, said some pretty hurtful things about the president. And I would also personally take offense at some of the things that were said if I were the president. Now, the difference here, however, is that that hasn't had any major impact on his feelings towards those countries. Not that I have seen. But I've also heard the president say, and he said it in public, so I'm not revealing any kind of executive privilege here, that Ukraine tried to take me down. What I have seen is some ill-advised Ukrainian officials, Ambassador Charlie's been removed as being the ambassador from here, made some pretty, unpleasant statements about, or some ill-advised op-eds. But I could list a whole host of ambassadors from allied countries who tweeted out, who had public comments about the president as well, and it did not affect security assistance having meetings with them. If it would, there'd been a lot of people he wouldn't have met with.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.